In the previous video on boundaries, I shared one of the challenges that you will experience when you start setting clear boundaries in your life. And that challenge is the resistance from others. It shows up in the form of what I call tantrums. Another challenge that you will most likely experience when you start setting boundaries in your life is the fear of being direct with someone. See, boundaries are an expression of our clarity, and being direct is also an expression of that same clarity. So when you're being direct with someone, it goes hand in hand with the boundaries, because you're no longer beating around the bush, you're no longer circling a topic. Instead, you're going straight to the heart of it, directly. This has many positive or benefits, we can call them. It's just efficient. Instead of wasting time because you are not direct, then things tend to linger. There's loose ends. The sort of that gray zone that I mentioned in the previous video, it continues. But when you're direct, you basically eliminate that gray zone. The directness comes with the boundary because they're both an expression of that clarity. It saves you time, it saves you energy from explaining yourself, but there's also this fear that most people will experience when you start being more direct. And that fear is the fear of what others think. The fear of being too harsh or strong or cold. It may show up as, I'm worried that I'm going to be rude if I just tell it like it is, right? But when you are direct, then that directness is actually an expression of that clarity. It's what keeps it clean. It's so that you don't get pulled into the mess, the confusion, the chaos. So when you are direct, it's like I said in that other video, it's like drawing the line in the sand. You see where you stand and you see where the other stands. And it makes things very clear in a very visible way because you're being direct. You're not circling a topic anymore. The circling is the confusion, the chaos, right? And when you are no longer in that confusion and you're expressing the clarity, there's no room for that gray zone. There's no room for the chaos. There's no room for the confusion. That confusion, that chaos is eliminated by being direct. It makes it very clear. It makes it very simple. It's very efficient. You're no longer stuck in this interpretation of what they think or what you think and this back and forth, which then is really living in the gray zone. Instead, you live in the clarity by being direct. But like I said, that challenge is when you're not direct. Then stepping into this expression of directness, the clarity that you're living and expressing it as that directness, it may feel unfamiliar because you're not used to being direct. And that challenge or that fear that arises, which is really the challenge that you have to overcome, is actually continuing to be direct and not letting that fear, which comes up in the form of self-judgment, judging, am I being too sharp? Am I being too cold? Am I being too it could be anything. Sometimes even that voice shows up as, am I being too rude? Right? But it saves you so much time and effort, and it makes you it doesn't make you, it keeps you clean and clear. Because when you're not direct with those people in your life, then you're living in that gray zone. You're living in that mess. You're living in that confusion. So being direct with people in your life, it keeps things clean and clear. It makes life so much easier when you're direct with someone, because you're not beating around the bush. You're not trying to walk on eggshells. You're not worried about hurting their feelings. You're not sacrificing your clarity anymore. That self-sacrifice is when you soften your edges because you fear what they're going to think. You fear what being direct really does. But when you're direct, like I said, it's like drawing a line in the sand, and then you get to see very clearly where you stand and where the other stands. And you'll see that just being direct, it starts clearing a lot of things in your life. The things that no longer serve you. These relationships that you're sort of beating around the bush, you're circling. There's a lot of loose ends. There's a lot of interpretation. Some of those relationships will fall away once you start being direct. And so that challenge, that fear of what other people think, is actually on a deeper level, it's the fear of losing your identity. Because when those people start falling away, then you see that actually what's really falling away is that identity. And that identity can't survive when you are simply being your true self. See, the resistance to being direct is the resistance to being your authentic self. Because your authentic self is direct. Your authentic self is that clarity that's expressed in and as those boundaries and being direct. So if you want to clean up, if you want to get out of the mess, perhaps that you're living, and start creating these boundaries to keep your life more clear and clean and live in and as that clarity, then I'm inviting you to be more direct, set those boundaries, and join me in truth.